Hey, 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 and welcome back to the Awakening Spaces podcast. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting down with John Skelly of HNST Environmental. He's a certified indoor environmental consultant who's been doing this work since 2003. John has been in this space for a very, very long time, but it wasn't until probably a few months ago that I actually found him on Instagram after having a reel go viral where he was talking about installing luxury vinyl plank flooring on a concrete slab. And if you've followed us for some time now, you know how we feel about luxury vinyl plank flooring. And if you don't, listen to this episode. But he does some amazing videos showcasing what he's finding on his sites. And one of the things I think is most helpful as a homeowner is watching inspectors and mold inspectors and learning from them, because they're going into these homes, they're seeing how things fail, and they're showing us. So in today's episode, we dive into mold inspection from a very holistic standpoint. We talk about duct cleaning. We go into basements and how to prevent mold in your basements and so much more. So I really hope that you enjoy this episode and you gather some insight and you understand how important it is to educate yourself and advocate for what you need when it comes to your home, because you are the person that is going to make the biggest difference when it comes to the health of your home. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode with John Skelly. Hey, John, welcome to the podcast.
Ashley, thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to chat with you. I've been following you along on Instagram for a while now, and I love your content. You do such a good job of walking people through, what you're finding on your inspections. And I just think you just give such amazing tips and advice. I would just love for you to share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got into this work of being a mold inspector.
Well, thanks again for having me. My name is John Skelly. I'm the owner of HNST Environmental. I'm a council certified indoor environmental consultant through the ACAC, American Council of Accredited Certification. Been in the business since 2003. I started working in the field as a lead technician for a full service restoration company, mold, water damage, fire damage cleanups. I did air duct cleaning. I got into the business actually working in lunch shifts at an Italian restaurant. Yes.
Wow.
I was recruited by a couple of off-duty cops having lunch who were just, said, hey, come work with us on your days off, and doing a little just construction, building. And that snowballed into getting a job opportunity with a restoration company. I was 23. So just a change from the restaurant businesses. And I worked with that company for 5.5 years, went back to the restaurant business, and actually got a call one day from a real estate agent who had held on to my phone number. And when she called the office and realized I wasn't there, called me directly and said, look, if you ever start your own business, let me know. And I started my own business. That was August of 2010.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What a fated sequence of events.
Yes. I never would have imagined this is where I'd end up, but I kind of fell into the business and I just took a chance 15 years ago, and I've been just doing independent mold inspections, and it's kind of evolved into other environmental assessments, indoor air quality, asbestos, things like that over the last 15 years.
Yeah. You talk a lot about taking a holistic approach to your assessments. Can you kind of walk us through what that means?
The house has a lot of moving parts, and I never encourage looking at anything through a tunnel vision, compartmentalized information. You always have to look at the big picture. You always have to take occupant complaints into account. You have to take all of the moving parts of the home, the crawl space, the basement, the attic, the ventilation system. You have to look at how they all interact and intertwine with each other when you're making an assessment of the home, because it's often not just one thing. It's often a lot of little things in the house. It can certainly be big things, but often it's a lot of little things that will add up that equates to poor indoor air quality or, a poor living space.
Yeah. Are you working with a lot of people who have health issues or they notice something? Like, what's your normal and typical clientele?
That is my everyday clientele now. Evolved a lot as a consultant, particularly over the last probably 3 years, where always over the years I've been, working with people here and there with Lyme disease or kids with pandas. My name was always around some of these community groups, but more and more over the last 24 to 36 months or so, it's 90+% of my clientele are people who fall into the mold sensitive category in one form or another.
So you've been doing this a long time. Are you just getting more calls from people who actually have health issues, or are you actively seeing a shift over the years of more people who have health issues?
Well, I think where the shift came, at least where I've seen it, is the fact that just the awareness, right? I don't think the awareness was there years ago. And, I always applaud the functional world, the practitioners and, the doctors who are looking at things differently, right? Outside of mainstream medicine, because people are now aware that mold and other toxins in the indoor environment may be having a negative impact on their health.
Yeah.
So I think it's the awareness more than anything else.
That's kind of what I see too. The mold explosion, right? I think Joe Stiebrook, people call him the godfather of building science. He just refreshed an article called The Mold Explosion where, he goes deep into it. And I've been in the industry personally for 7 years, and it feels like just in this last 7 years, it's exploded completely and the awareness is there. And I think that can be to a detriment sometimes, because I think people get a functional lab saying that they have mold or mycotoxins in their system, and then it takes them down this whole rabbit hole and it spirals. And I think it can create a lot of fear and nervous system dysregulation too. And oftentimes there is going to be some sort of environmental exposure in our home, but at what level is it worth leaving the property or burning the house down, So I'm actually curious what your thoughts are on that. When you go into homes, obviously you're getting calls from people and you're in a different climate too. You're in New York.
Yeah.
Right. What are the level of issues you're seeing in homes?
It varies significantly. And my basis of comparison is massive, right? When I say something is small problem or a moderate problem or severe problem, I've been doing this for a long, long time. I've seen some really nasty situations over the years, but I tell everybody that, look, your problem is your problem. Right?
Yeah.
No matter how big or small, we're not going to compare to anybody else's, because what is obviously very complicated is dose response, right? And how much a little bit can translate to a buildup in the person's system that manifests itself to a symptom, right? So one of the things that I stay far, far away from is I don't diagnose people. It's not my place. It's not my role. My role is to figure out what's going on in the house, give you information about what the underlying cause is and what the remedy is. Also to help my clients categorize things as to, look, this is yes, it's mold, but it's a smaller issue. This is a modest problem. This is a more severe issue. This is where you need to focus on first, right? Because often people can't do everything at once, right? There's a client last week, and there's simple things. They had a master shower that was breaking down that needed to be replaced. They had carpets that needed to be replaced. They had windows that needed to be replaced. They had some mold and water damage in a few-ish areas in the house. They had mold in the ductwork. The ductwork needed to be replaced, right? So where do you start, right? They had a lot of different things. So obviously we try to help people put these things in order of importance. What I say to everybody is this, because people ask me all the time, is it safe for me? Is it safe for my family? There are no state or federal standards for mold exposure, right? Everybody's physiology is completely different. The way one person reacts versus another is completely different. I tell them, if you leave the house, if you spend time outside the house, if you go away after the weekend, you go on vacation, and for example, you come back and you feel worse and, it's the same pattern. Now, knowing what you know, having the information that I've just given you about your house, maybe make an informed decision that's best for you. There's consultants in my field who will tell people to leave their homes. I think it's irresponsible because it feeds into what you were talking about before with that fear. Yeah. Because it's very scary for people. If they're sick, their children are sick. With the awareness comes, like you said before, it can be a little dangerous because with that comes a lot of information. And, how filtered is that information?
Right. Information overload.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to dive into that a little bit more, like the compartmentalization, right? So that's something that I've done with clients too in the past who are just trying to navigate mold, is who can't leave, who can't afford to do everything. We have to work within people's means. It's just not realistic to be like, you have to leave. I do think it depends on the person and where they're at with their health too. But we would sometimes say, create one room that's really safe that you can rest and repair, usually starting in the bedroom. Can we start there where you can try to block that area off? I'm curious how you're working with clients in terms of like phasing things out.
I'm not as involved as you might think maybe down the road with the process. I mean, people lean on me all the time, some a lot, some a little, some none at all. Right? The majority of the people, I try to give them as much direction and guidance as I can within the initial consult and the report. And I guess in ways, maybe because I'm not hearing back, maybe that's because I'm giving them good guidance. But I had that conversation with someone just last week. They're thinking about selling their house, they have a big home. All their problems were really confined to the basement. They may be selling, they may be renting, they weren't sure which direction they were going, but they also had a lot of dust in the house, a lot of dust reservoirs, and the primary complaint was allergies, right? So dust is always going to be front and center. And they we're a family that, spend most of their time in one or two rooms, right? And I said, we're not sure if we can do everything at once. So just work your way backwards, right? Yeah. Exactly what you said. Start in the bedroom where you spend the most of the time, get this room as clean as you can, get an air purifier, a HEPA filtered unit for the room, and then work your way outwards from there.
Yeah, you almost have to do that sometimes. And it's also hard too, because a lot of that happens a lot too, where people just don't know what they're going to do with the house. How long are they going to be in the house? And I've seen that a lot. And this actually happened to me. It's like, I'll be in the house for maybe another 6 months. 6 months turns into a year, turns into 2 years, turns into 3.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes, people might have a problem with their central air conditioning system, but it's fall, right? So, okay, you have 6 months to figure that part of the equation out. So put that on the back burner. Or sometimes people get hyperfixated or focused on maybe a small area of mold that we found. And I'm like, look, you have wall-to-wall carpets in the house. And they keep going back to that. And I'm like, no, the carpet's actually giving you a greater exposure rate more than you realize. Mm-hmm. Because there's so much particulate in carpet and things like that. So again, try to help people, point them in the right direction, because mold can be scary, but sometimes it's not always the biggest issue. It can be things that might seem innocuous like carpet.
Yeah. If you had to zoom out and look at like all the places that you inspect, how much of it is dust accumulation and poor cleaning versus not maintaining the home well versus actual building defects?
So many mold problems are preventable. While there's so much going on with trying to, create more regulation in the industry, which is phenomenal. Right? We need it. We need better standards. We need better training, minimum experience requirements for people getting into the field for doing what I'm doing. At the end of the day, this comes down to consumer awareness. New York State created a mold law 10 years ago, but you think they would send out a mailer, homeowners in the state of New York. January next month is a decade since the New York State mold law went into effect. And people are still calling me up saying, oh, so-and-so said I had to get an inspection. Do I really need to do this before I get a remediation plan done? So consumer awareness is everything. So many things are preventable, running dehumidifiers in the basement, single most important thing that people can do. Right? I'm not sure how it is in Colorado. We have a lot of basements here. We have a lot of old basements. We have a lot of crawl spaces, cleaning up after floods, leaks, water damage. People's basement, they have 2 inches of water. They think, okay, even half an inch of water. This is a common one. A half an inch of water, they rip up the carpet. But what happens via capillary action is moisture gets absorbed into the drywall and you get a foot of absorption and they clean it up. They think they did everything right, but they end up with mold on the drywall because they didn't cut the walls, right? A lot of it's not always maintaining things right, not responding to situations the right way. And then, over-reliance on professionals. Right. We want to rely on professionals, right? You want to rely on this professional. You want to rely on you when you're hiring us or consulting with us. But people have their air handlers serviced and, they chronic sinus infections. And I open up the air handler and it's full of mold. Ductwork's full of mold. Brand new air handler, moldy ductwork. And the professionals didn't say anything, didn't bring it to their attention. Or one of the things I focus on a lot is LVP, luxury vinyl plank on concrete slabs, right? I think that's what got me famous on social media about 9 months ago was that video, right? Yeah. And, again, contractors not making the clients aware like, hey, okay, you could do this, but here's the end result, right? There's building defects, certainly. There's building methods that I don't agree with old basements, damp, basements from the 1930s, when they're finishing them right against the foundation. And it's just, why are you doing this? I suppose I see less, not like building defects in the new construction, so much as I do contractors forcing the issue in basements, for example, putting building materials in damp basements where they just shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think something that I see too when it comes to that renovation piece is the contractors just think, okay, it's a renovation. We're just going to cosmetically update this and we're not thinking about anything else. I'm working on a project right now where that exact thing happened. They opened up the shower. They brought everything down to the studs. Right behind the shower, there's mold all over the 2 layers of felt paper from the existing building envelope. And they removed the sheathing because it rotted. And they were just going to leave everything. And they were just going to cover it up. And luckily, the homeowner was like, what is this stuff? Is this mold? I want to actually do something. The contractor's like, no. It's fine. We do this all the time. You're fine. Once we put that up, you won't even get exposed to it. And there's that whole piece of like not understanding how air moves and this education. And this is a multi-million-dollar builder who's highly reputable in his area. It's just really crazy how people just don't care about what's going on behind the walls and are not thinking about what the damage could be.
I saw just that last week on an inspection, and they had happened to have a second leak that prompted them to cut a hole in the wall behind a new shower. And you could see the original drywall, which was green board up on, it was all moldy. It was still hanging on the studs, covered in mold. They just put a new shower right over it. So much of it's ignorance, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously people get gaslit so much, and I don't understand the human condition sometimes. Just because you don't believe it or just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it can't happen to somebody else. Just hidden mold behind the wall is not going to affect us. Well, how do you really know that?
I had another client who was cleaning up her mold situation with her own bleach and rag. When she was doing a kitchen renovation, she saw the mold on the walls and started just cleaning it up. And 4 months later, she was bedridden. Wow. And you might think, oh, this doesn't bother me. And then you never know. So it's important to be cautious about it.
Absolutely.
How do you take care of yourself while you're doing all these inspections, since we're on the topic of health?
I'm definitely not the poster child for taking care of myself. Certainly not the first 40 years of my life, but I'm very lucky. I'm blessed with good genetics, and I focus a lot on sleep and exercise and, just a good diet and, modest diet. But I often think about it, the people who are out there in the trenches, obviously there's so many people getting into the business now who have their own story with it and are sensitized to mold, and they have to take extreme precautions when they're going out there. I do wear a respirator or a mask or, depending on the circumstances, but I'm fairly tolerant, thank goodness.
Yeah, that's good. When you're looking at what's been done previously before you've come in, are there common themes or things that you're seeing that you're like, why would somebody do this? Or just issues with the industry when it comes to mold inspection?
First of all, I think that the new breed of inspector, the new breed of consultant that is out there is going to set the standard for the future, right? Because it's personal to them. They lead immediately with empathy and concern and a true desire to help people. Right? Because when you've been hurt, when you've been impacted by something, you often want to prevent that from happening to other people. My industry, as many industries, can be very profitable. The way I conduct inspections, the way I conduct business, it's not very sexy. There's a way to do it, and there's a way to do it honestly and with integrity, right? And so one of the biggest issues is obviously, you see it all the time, it's just I was talking about it last week, mold testers, right? Just the companies who just come out and they test the mold, and the consumers don't really know. So they call people and they say, well, I want to, check my house for mold. They say, well, we'll test the air. And you think, well, okay, we're breathing it, we're inhaling it. That makes sense. We test the air. But I really feel a lot of these companies are doing people a disservice, because at the end of the day, if you're not solving the people's problems, what are you doing? You just sold a sample. You just sold a product. It's like selling a steak to a vegetarian. It's no good. Right. There's a place for that. There's a lot of situations with insurance, real estate, limited scope inspections. Yeah, you need testing. You need these people to come out and just document situations. But when someone is truly sick in the home, and if you're not doing a thorough inspection, to me, it's a wasted exercise. And I can say for myself, I didn't always do the most thorough inspection. I mean, my inspections have taken longer and longer the longer I've been doing inspections, but it was never for lack of trying to do the right thing. Now I just do things differently. I do things better. One of the biggest things is just lack of really trying to do a proper inspection. There's also a lot of lack of knowledge. I'm not the most studied person, but I absorb things very well. I'm able to take that information, digest, and spin it back to my client in a way they can understand things, and I try to explain things in detail. They just don't have answers. They have mold. They have lab reports that says they have mold. They have a kind of a cookie cutter protocol, but they don't know where to go. They don't know what next step.
That's what I see all the time. It's so hard to find good inspectors. We need inspectors because, as you already shared earlier, the inspector is the person who writes the protocol, and then the remediation company is supposed to follow that protocol. And then the inspector is supposed to come back out and clear the work that was done by the remediation company. The projects that I've worked on, if I'm not working with a reputable inspector that I know knows their stuff, which is a lot of the times we're just trying to do our best to vet the best person, because I'm working all over the US. And so what you find all over the US and the education that's available, it's really very vast. And if I'm not really saying step by step, inspect this, test this, do this. They'll sometimes just come in and just do an air sample. They don't give a protocol. We have no idea what the next steps are. I really feel like I have to micromanage people so much. It's very challenging to find good inspectors who put that protocol together. So what would you say makes you different, or what have you done differently that you think adds to the thoroughness of your work?
I set a reminder a few years ago on my phone, and I set it 3 times a day, and it said, "Did you do your best job?" And it was just a personal reminder to myself just to go the extra mile. And I'll sometimes find myself getting frustrated because I'm working longer on a report than maybe I feel I should or I need to, or what the client paid for that specific report. But I remind myself that doesn't matter because I'm trying to put out a good product at the end of the day, right? And that's to give the client as much information as I can about their specific situation, right? Because again, you can go out and it's very easy. You can find mold and, yeah, we found it. Maybe you're really good at locating it. But the true value, I think, is helping people understand, of course, why they have the problem, right? Which contractor they need to call. Is it a landscaper, a mechanical contractor, a roofer? Obviously, I can't figure out every problem, but I can point people in the right direction and help them understand what next steps are. I also try to write a very specific protocol, as that's not generalized. It's just very, very specific. I always offer myself to my clients indefinitely, as much as they need after the fact. I'm there for you throughout the process.
That's huge. Just knowing they can come back and get some extra support. And what you said too, like you're coming in and finding the symptom of what could be the problem of a specialty, so many different specialties in the build world: landscape, roofer, siding contractor, windows. It's just all trying to figure out who does fix this problem.
Because homeowners don't know. They're professionals in their own right or experts in their own field, but homeownership is challenging. There's so much to know. There's so much to understand. And again, what I said before is it's not to blame the homeowner, but things are preventable. And it's like anything, the more educated you are, the more empowered you are. I love when clients call me and they have their list of questions and they're ready, right? Because they've been, using whatever. They're working with consultants, they work with, Facebook and, Kendra over Change the Air's done what a job, my goodness.
Yeah.
And just empowering people with that information, that's what people need. I tell my clients this all the time. I say, look, if we can use an NFL analogy, right, where I'm the offensive coordinator, I'm sitting up in the booth, I'm calling the plays, right? But you're the quarterback on the field. You have to hit the receivers, right? The receivers are the contractors, the remediation company, the landscaper, whatever, people around you. I'm always there for you if you need to call an audible, but you have to be involved. And again, a lot of times homeowners are standoffish. They don't get involved enough. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day for me. Just get involved as much as you can in whatever project it is and understand it as much as you can.
Absolutely. I have a guide called The Awakened Homeowner. It's like we need to awaken. We need to become more enlightened on our homes because we can have experts who do good and care like you do, right? But solely we are going to be the ones who take care of it the way that it needs to be taken care of. We know it better, just like the bodies that we live in. We know what our symptoms are. We see things on a daily basis. We're closer to the situation. So it's so important that we advocate for ourselves and do our research and understand it. Education is so important. I think everyone who owns a home needs to understand how it works at a very baseline level.
Yep.
If somebody were to, say, self-diagnose their home from outside to inside, can you walk us through a high-level view of your inspections and what are some things that people should look for to sort of self-assess their home for health?
So I suppose starting on the outside, the first thing you just do is walk around, look at the landscape, look at the drainage, look at where the water goes. I'll often tell my clients to, stand outside in the rain. Don't forget to put a coat on, but stand out in the rain and watch where the water goes. Watch your gutters, look at where the water is flowing, and noticing that slopes in the landscape are pretty easy to identify or if water's pooling or ponding, right? The first few years I lived in a condo for 10 years, and when I first bought a house, every time it would rain, I would run down into the basement and check my basement walls. just to see. Look at the roof lines, look at where, connecting roofs are for anything that just looks out of place or rot, or look for just cracked caulking or separation around flashing or joints around the windows, things like that. Gutters, obviously make sure your gutters are cleaned, make sure they're not overflowing. And then in the basement, I focus a lot on storage, keeping cardboard off the ground and keeping things away from foundation walls. Have a moisture meter at hand.
I have a question on that, actually.
Yeah.
How often do you see like a tiny little crack in some caulking or something actually creating a much larger problem?
I'm actually working with a client now. It was a very unique situation where building history is huge when I'm doing a diagnosis, right? And there was a history of rainwater. There was overflowing a gutter and running onto a roof line that was above a porch. And then we looked a little more closely. There was some staining on the brick, and the brick outside was wet. Then I did invasive wall cavity moisture testing. So they're 6-inch probes that you actually put into the wall so you can hit the insulation, you can hit the sheething, and it was saturated. And then we went to another room upstairs, it was saturated. And subsequently, they're basically ripping off the front of the house. They told me they actually found another hole on the roof during the whole process, and the garage was framed 1 inch too far away from the building, and they caulked it, and the caulking was fine for 15 years, and then it separated, and water was slowly getting in, and just again by chance something like this was found. I don't do a ton of exterior forensic stuff. Sometimes I will recommend to bring someone else in. I have a very trained eye in the indoor environment, so I'll often refer someone who is maybe more of a trained eye in the exterior that I wouldn't have. So
then you start outside and then you go inside. You have a lot of really great videos of garages. What can people look for in their garage?
Well, garages are unconditioned parts of the home, right? So depending on what geographical area you live in, right? I'm in the Northeast, it's a very mixed climate, but garages are humid and people store cardboard on the ground, keep it off the ground. Things get wet, vapor moving through the concrete. They often don't put vapor barriers under concrete slabs. Cardboard can get moldy depending on how high the water table is, how much vapor is moving through the concrete. Always run a dehumidifier in your garage. Often you have uninsulated ductwork running through the walls that butt up to the garage. That ends up leading to mold. So I emphasize storage and moisture management, really, just dehumidification. If you're going to use gym mats, flip them regularly. Yeah.
You've got a lot of videos on that, and I share that too.
Yeah, quite crazy. Yeah, anything that's going to trap vapor from moving through the concrete, you want to just try to be aware of. And if you are going to use them, try to just flip them regularly so that you're not allowing something to build up. Yeah.
So I assume you're not a fan of converting your existing garage into a gym.
My little garage from the 1948, I have my little gym down there. It's very basic. I always tell people it's like a good workout. Grab those horse stall mats and drag them outside and power wash them. You get your cardio in for the day. But
it's just monitoring it.
People get nervous about things going to get wet. Of course, things get wet. I mean, we have to cohabitate with everything, right? When moisture is just left stagnant or is left, unmanaged or uncontrolled. I always joke, it's an entrepreneurial book, a line I took from it that said, always put yourself in a position to be successful. And I joke that my dogs are always in a position to be successful because whenever I'm in the kitchen, they're always right there. And most often they are successful. And I say that to my clients too, like never put a place of judgment, but people, sometimes the garage is a bit messy, their basement's a bit messy. And it's like, look, in the event of water damage, right? Hot water heater pops, you come back from vacation, put yourself in a position to be successful. Because if you have things stored nice and neat and off the ground and in plastic bin, you're going to limit your damage. Right. And that's kind of rolls into a conversation I often have with people, and a checklist I put together, a basement construction checklist of kind of do's and don'ts, right? To, again, put yourself in a position to be successful in the event a water damage event happens. Because you can do all the waterproofing, driest basement, sump pumps, backups, whole house generator, and then the hot water heater bursts.
Yeah. What are some things on your basement do's and don't checklist? So now we're moved from the garage going to the basement.
Yeah. So, again, same thing. It's moisture control, not overpacking closets, using open back shelves, using dehumidifiers, use multiple dehumidifiers if your basement's compartmentalized into different rooms or areas, or opt for a central installed one like a Santa Fe Aprilaire type system. Don't install your drywall all the way to the ground. Use capillary breaks, use metal framing. Nobody uses capillary breaks.
Yeah. Can you walk us through what that means for those who are listening and don't know what that is?
So a capillary break is essentially a medium that prevents the transfer of moisture from one building component to another. So for example, if you were to use a strip of plastic material below a sole plate, right, which is the horizontal framing stud along the ground, it's going to prevent transfer of moisture between the slab and the plate. If you install sheetrock all the way to the touching the concrete, capillary action can soak up moisture. So if you float it a few inches off the ground, it also gives you a grace in the event that, water damage happens. If you get an inch or two of water, you can often just pop off the base moldings and you don't have to cut walls.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah, I love cabinets on stilts also, as opposed to the traditional cabinet that sits on the floor.
Yeah. When you're going in basements, you're seeing a lot of that. People have these things stored, you're pulling them out, and it's just underneath. You're just finding stuff almost every time. An older home that might not have a vapor barrier below the slab.
Yeah, there's a lot of homes where I am early 1900s, mid 1900s, and a lot of high water tables. So yeah, cardboard on concrete often leads to mold underneath cardboard boxes. And of course, vinyl on these concrete slabs. I'm not a fan of them. It depends. There's a lot of variables. If the floor is dry enough, it can often sustain it. It's not going to be an issue if, non-mold sensitive clients, but most of my clients are really sensitized and, they can be a very high risk flooring system.
Yeah, definitely. I don't like them for a lot of reasons, that being a very big one. Another just being that when we do have to get rid of them, they just go into a landfill and there's nothing we can do with them. So all those microplastics just end up in our environment. I always say just get rid of the LVP, get rid of the LVT. I don't love it, but definitely don't install it on a basement slab that you have no idea what's underneath that concrete or if it's moisture protected.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were building a house, after all these things that you see, what are some of the things you would just not do because you know that it's just not good practice, it's going to fail?
I also have a, construction checklist that I put together for my clients, some do's and don'ts during the construction phase, such as, do make sure that the landscaping and drainage infrastructure is in place before you start finishing the basement. Right. Or putting framing and things like that, or having the utilities in place to have the ability to, use fans and dehumidifiers because often, interior structures are getting wet during the construction phase. Again, storage of cardboard, right? I mean, people forget how moldy cardboard can get. And a lot of times people are, they're DNA testing the dust in homes of new constructions. And they're finding high levels of spore equivalents. It doesn't mean they have a problem in the house. It just comes from, things that happen during the construction phase. Again, just managing moisture during the building phase as best as you possibly can, right? I think, you've talked about it, just getting everything in writing and making sure that you're working with somebody who's going to pay attention to these things, right? Because none of this is rocket science. It's just attention to details. Some of the things I wouldn't do, don't run your HVAC. It's funny. It's not funny. I swear every renovation, every new construction, but right before they start sanding, they yell around the house and say, turn on the HVAC because it gets caked and you can't get that dust out of there. It just won't, the traditional duct cleaning does not get that fine dust out of the system.
Yeah. And you know this because you have a background in duct cleaning.
I do.
Yeah. Are you going in and seeing the ducts like when it should be a brand new duct system and finding all kinds of crazy stuff in them?
Yeah. So again, with the awareness, the more awareness is great. So I'm doing more pre-drywall inspections. I actually have one next week.
Awesome.
Unfortunately, the bulk of HVAC systems, new build or recent renovation, are just filled with construction dust. Wow. Absolutely filled with construction dust. And again, it's just laziness, sloppiness on the, I'm not trying to blame blanket contractors, but it often comes down to them and what they're doing in the house. And having alternative solutions in place to heat the home, or someone did a post about that last week, the Building Abundance, someone I did an inspection for, pre-drywall inspection. He's out of Westchester, New York, and they're trying to build houses to these specs where they're just taking every precaution they possibly can throughout the entire process, one of which is not running the HVAC. Because that fine dust is just, you're not going to get it out, unfortunately, with conventional duct cleaning methods.
Yeah. When do you recommend somebody clean their ducts, and when do you recommend somebody don't clean their ducts?
There's no published data that says the air quality is better or the particle levels in your home is reduced following air duct cleaning. Mold, rodent, or water damage, all the governing bodies agree. I agree that, duct cleaning should be done. Of course, if there's mold in the system that's growing on the interior components, if there's mold in the surrounding environment or ductwork that runs through a crawl space that has mold, yes, it should be cleaned. But the truth is that duct cleaning is very limited. You'll see some of my upcoming videos. I draw a little caricature in the dust in the ductwork after it had been cleaned multiple times.
Wow.
It's just because that fine layer just doesn't come out, Some of it does depend on the duct cleaning company. There are rotary brush systems that are a little bit more effective than some of the traditional whips that are used, but you can never white glove clean the ductwork. I'm not talking about construction dust, just accumulated dust over the years. Obviously, if the house is very dirty or at the, post-construction, you should definitely do the duct cleaning. I agree it should be done for people who have allergies, even though there's no published data. I think it's beneficial just to reduce the dust burden in the home.
Is there ever a time where someone shouldn't clean their ducts? Like it's dangerous to clean their ducts? Because I've always thought if there's like an active mold situation going on and it depends on what's the source, right? Is the source outside and then the ductwork is recirculating the problem? Or is the source of the issue coming from like the coils or within the system itself? Is there anything people need to know about taking care when it comes to potential mold in their ductwork and cleaning their ductwork?
The first part of the question, when should you not clean your ductwork? I would say if there's asbestos on the ductwork. They wrap ductwork very commonly with a white asbestos paper years ago. And if you have any inkling that it's on the ductwork, you shouldn't clean the ducts at all because the vibration created by the duct cleaning process can release asbestos fibers into the house. Okay, so that's something for consideration. The second part of your question, if there's mold on the coil or there's mold in the plenum or, the blower motor, it should always be cleaned. I just think the extent of the cleaning is going to vary. I had a conversation with a client last week who was mold in their system. I said it's kind of a 1 out of 10. It's not really bad. And the way my plan is written, it's generic in the sense that, it talks about removing things in sealed plastic and using HEPA air filtration in the immediate areas while you're cleaning an air handler. But it was more having to actually dismantle the unit where I wanted the additional procedures in place, right? So sometimes you have to be removing ductwork under negative pressure. You have to be, wrapping ductwork before you're taking it out through the house because sometimes entire systems are filled with mold sometimes.
Yeah.
So the precautions will change or sometimes it's just not worth cleaning based on the age of the system. This is particularly something I run into a lot. If it's going to cost you $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to properly remediate an air handler that's 18 years old, money is better spent on a new system. So there's certainly occasions where I'll discourage remediation or cleaning as opposed to just sometimes replacement, just from a cost-effective place.
Yeah, that's interesting. But if there's mold in the system, a regular just duct cleaning company probably shouldn't come in and just start cleaning it because, like you said, there's certain cases where you might be needing to take things apart and doing it under negative pressure and containment and things like that. So are you helping write the protocol for that for people?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
Well, I think one of the issues with duct cleaning or always the concerns is that the cleaning process disturbs a lot of dust. And if you disturb the dust without equally removing what you've disturbed, you can cause a blowout, right? Where dust can get blown out through the house. So obviously, even more so if there's mold in the system or there's fiberglass ductwork or fiberglass boots, which you'll often find. So sometimes there's certainly circumstances where they can be doing more harm than good. Where this often will get complicated for the client is that most duct cleaning companies don't deal with mold. Most mold remediators don't deal with duct cleaning, right? There's a specialized few duct cleaners that will deal with mold in ventilation systems. So it often has to be a coordinated effort. Or a coordinated effort with, the remediator. Well, I'm not disconnecting ductwork, so you have to coordinate this with your mechanical contractor, right? So I'll have this conversation with the client and, is it executed the way it should be? I don't know sometimes, to be perfectly fair.
Yeah.
I try to guide them as best as I can, but it often does have to be a coordinated effort. Goes back to me saying before where you just have to be involved as a homeowner because you have to make sure that you're on the mechanical contractor, you're on the remediation company. And someone called me last week. I had kind of given them a free consult on the project, and they called me just really upset because there was supposed to be coordination between the contractors and there wasn't. And she got all the assurances and everything. And these things happen, but all you can do is just try to be on top of everything.
Yeah.
And lean on the professionals that are, like myself, for example, that's willing to guide you as best as I can.
Yeah, I see that in all areas, especially building, renovating, whether it's just mold inspection. I mean, there's just a lack of coordination. And that's actually partly the reason why I sort of started getting more into the owner's representative role for my clients. And I'd say that's like what I started having to do was acting as like the coordinator. I was doing interior design and I realized how uncoordinated things were on a project that ended up in a lawsuit. And it just led me to realizing like if somebody isn't micromanaging and coordinating all the pieces and overseeing that because the client can't or doesn't feel capable, someone needs to be doing that. And so that's actually what I've started doing is saying, okay, well, we've got this mold inspector here, and then now we have to coordinate the remediation company, and now the builder has to know this, this, and this. And it takes a lot of time to coordinate all those pieces. So if a homeowner has a job, kids, all these things, it makes sense why they can't and why things don't get coordinated and they get missed, because it's a full-time job to coordinate all these different trades and subs, and it's tough.
For sure. Yeah, it's an excellent point.
Well, I really, really appreciate you coming onto the podcast and sharing all your wisdom with me. And I always like to leave people on a high note after we have all these conversations about environmental toxins. And I just would love if you could leave us a little nugget of wisdom, something that you've learned, whether it's in your business, whether it's in your life. You've already dropped a few really great golden nuggets, that you do and things that you do to improve your mental state. But if you could just leave us with one last piece of wisdom, we'd love it.
Don't eat the yellow snow. No, I'm just kidding. That is actually an important one. But that's why they have warning labels on things. One more tidbit of wisdom: stay in the moment. And I think as a society, we're impulsive, we're impatient, we're reactive. Right. So going through an inspection, sometimes clients will immediately start reacting and they say, oh, I'll start taking these things out now. And I'm like, just take a step back, right? I said, we'll do the inspection. I said, I'm going to give you a report. And I said, you're going to, enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I said, you're going to look at this report and you're going to sit back and look at the big picture because there are so many moving parts to this project, right? Kind of just what you were talking about before. And a lot of contractors to coordinate, and you have to maybe empty out your basement, or you have to empty out a few rooms. Do you have a storage pod? Where are you putting everything? Are you making a clean room in the house, right? So just pause, take a deep breath, try to stay in the moment as much as you can and figure things out. But for me, staying in the moment is everything. That's how I keep my head screwed on. It's a crazy world out there, and it's very easy to get caught up in it.
Yes, it is. I love that. Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate you. How can people find you? How can people work with you? Actually, you mentioned you have a project in Florida, so do you travel?
Oh, no, that was just a client who lives in Florida. So yeah, thank you. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, making me part of what you're doing here. You're doing great things yourself. So John Skelly, HNST Environmental. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, John the Mold Guy. You can reach out to me at hnstenvironmental.com. I'm currently working in 4 states. Primarily, I'm not traveling outside of the 4-state area at the moment. I will be launching some, on-site remote consulting next year. So you will be able to work with me remotely, trying to, expand and try to help more people around the country. Again, just navigate their remediation process, fill in the blanks with inspections of what's missing.
So needed. What 4 states do you work in, just so we're clear?
Yeah, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. So pretty much all of New Jersey, southern, eastern New York, eastern Pennsylvania, and southwestern Connecticut.
Awesome. Well, that is so good to know. Thank you so, so much. Until next time, John.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Awakening Spaces podcast. If you're ready to take what you've learned and start applying it to your own home, then there's a few ways that we can support you. On our website, you can find a collection of free and paid guides and courses that will walk you through everything from designing a healthy home to choosing safe materials and reducing mold, chemical, and EMF exposure. And if you're looking for more personalized guidance, then we also offer one-on-one consulting and design support, where we act as your owner's representative to help you plan, manage, and execute your new build or renovation project with confidence. You can explore all of these offerings on our website at awakeningspaces.com. And if this podcast has helped you in any way, we would be so incredibly grateful if you would like, subscribe, and share this podcast so that it can reach more people. Until next time, thank you so much for listening and being here and stepping into what it means to be an awakened homeowner.